I'm Dr. Kathy McFarland.
And I'm Mark Bobo, and welcome to the OSBA Forum. Kathy, how are you today?
I am very well. How are you, Mr. Dad of a graduate or a graduate this weekend or
this
last
weekend coming? This weekend coming.
Upcoming weekend.
We tried the cap and gown on. We've done the whole parade. Couple tears.
How are you feeling?
Couple tears. Getting older, but it's going to be great. And I'm very excited for him and very proud of him. So shout out Ezra. Congratulations.
It's exciting because you drive through neighborhoods and you see the big signs and congratulations. Lots of graduations going on, right? Elementary school students to middle school school going to high school. We have college graduations. So a big shout out to all of our graduates out there. Well done, and we commend you on all the hard work. And we're excited for the future for them.
Yes, indeed. But I will say this, Kathy. Our surroundings have changed a little bit.
We are in a new studio.
Just a little bit,
yes. And so we are welcoming you to our new studio, and we're excited. And a big shout out to the OSBA team for all the work they've put in to create this great space that we will be spending hopefully a lot of time with our audience.
Great studio and great job to our team. But as always, we're glad to be here with the OSBA Forum as we want to make sure that we bring you all the pressing issues that are happening in public education as we want to keep you informed. And so today, Kathy, everywhere we look, we are hearing the same two letters, and that is AI, artificial intelligence. And though AI has been with us for quite some time, its reintroduction into society really happened about 2 years ago with ChatGPT. And now some 2 years later, we live in a world where AI is at our fingertips to make our lives and our work just a little bit easier. So though convenient, AI has caused some concerns within our workplace and within our schools. And today we want to talk about AI, its impact, and how best to make AI an ally. And so our guest today certainly will help us with that, Kathy. So who do we have with us here today?
Yes. I'm so interested as a former English teacher to have this conversation because when I was a teacher, Cliff Notes were the big thing. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. So we're pleased to welcome Chris Berry, CEO of OhioX, and Andrew Wheatley, Director of Curriculum and Instruction for 712 at Lakota Schools. Chris serves as the president and CEO of OhioX, a statewide nonprofit working to build Ohio into a tech hub. OhioX is a member-based organization with representation from Fortune 500 companies, universities, research organizations, startups, and tech-focused businesses. The work of OhioX centers around connecting, promoting, and advocating for tech and innovation in Ohio. Previously, Chris served as the Chief of Staff and Director of Communications at the Ohio Treasurer's Office. He began his career on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Andrew Wheatley is the Director of Secondary Curriculum at Lakota Schools. He describes himself as an education nerd and is deeply, deeply passionate about all things that have to do with learning. His most notable work is designing the Synovation Lab, a personalized learning school within a school. The Lakota Cyber Academy, a nationally recognized high school cybersecurity program, and is in the initial phases of Lakota's artificial intelligence pathway. Andrew served on the team that developed the Ohio AI Toolkit and currently serves on the Ohio AI in Education Coalition. Chris and Andrew, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure, happy to go, and thanks so much for having me and allowing us to share a little bit about the work we're doing at OhioX. And so as you mentioned in your great introduction, we are a statewide technology trade association. We have a bit of an interesting name because we just started a few years ago. And so groups like yours and so many others in Columbus that are doing statewide work with industries and sectors oftentimes have been around for many, many years, some kind of in the traditional business settings, sometimes over 100 years. But technology as really a driver of businesses is a bit newer. And so we've only been around for about 4+ years at this point. And for us, every company is a tech company. And so you can be in banking, financial services, healthcare, insurance, agriculture, you name it. A lot of software, as you can imagine. But our work brings all of that together because tech is an industry. And so the work you all do each and every day for schools, we're doing largely for the first time for technology-based companies and organizations. And it's a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Andrew.
Yeah, I'm in my 20th year of education this year and 6 years as a curriculum director at Lakota Schools. We're a school district of about 17,000 students just north of Cincinnati. And so, I love all things curriculum instruction, and that's my day-to-day job. But since I was little, I've always had a passion for technology. So it's really cool to get involved in this AI work and just kind of see that through that lens also. So really excited to have this conversation today and honor really to share the stage here with the two of you and with Chris.
Yeah, well, great. Well, welcome. All right. So, Chris, with the work of Lieutenant Governor Husted's office, Innovate Ohio, Ohio is leading the way regarding tech innovation. How might AI fundamentally transform the traditional educational model, and what radical changes should we anticipate and prepare for?
Yeah. Well, AI is, and just like educators and schools are thinking about this technology, so is every business. And the biggest thing is, I think we don't quite know what the technology is going to do and truly bring. Just a few years ago, there was a lot of voices talking about the future of careers, and you should get away from things like the skilled trades and go into things like coding and app development and more kind of software engineering. Well, it's kind of been flipped. And if you look at areas where there seems to be a lot of safety and security, things like skilled trades are kind of at the top of the list. But there is so much disruption with AI. We work with technologists from startups to Fortune 500 companies and everything in between. And one of the things that's interesting that they have been saying is that AI isn't going to take jobs. That where jobs are going to be lost are to people that know how to use AI. And so I think that's the real opportunity, because every country, every city, every state, every region across the world is going to be in some ways disrupted by artificial intelligence. It's how we navigate it. And I think with the work of Lieutenant Governor John Husted, Innovate Ohio, groups like our AI Education Coalition, we have a real opportunity for Ohio to stand out and lead amongst the states.
Oh, that's exciting.
So Andrew, as a instruction leader and an educational leader, we always talked about personalized learning and how important that is. So help us understand how AI can assist with that personalized learning, but I also like you to deal with the benefits of it, but also consider some drawbacks in regards to that personalized learning.
Personalized learning, it's really what we want to give with our students, right? And it's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of teachers to really figure out, like, how do I scale out personalized learning for each and every one of our students?
Yeah.
Most school districts, including ours, we spent a lot of time. In fact, we spent about the past 4 years really providing PD with our teachers on personalized learning. But I think with generative AI, we finally have some tools and some resources that are going to help with teachers of the lift of providing personalized learning to each and every student. Some examples of that, recently working with some teachers, and they're trying to work on some assessments and assessment questions, right? And then what they're starting to find out is that they needed to have assessment questions that were either at different levels for like a formative assessment to meet their students' needs, whether those levels need to be higher or they needed to, a lower level for a student. And sometimes those can be like either time-consuming tasks for teachers or even sometimes difficult tasks for teachers, and generative AI can really help with that. And kind of one other example with that too, on the assessment side of things, we've been working a lot with DOK level, with depth of knowledge level.
Yeah.
And I found that generative AI is like really good at saying, like, here's a question I already have. Like, this is a good question, I already have it, but I need to move it from 2 to 4 or 2 to 3 or 1 to whatever, right? And so generative AI just really takes a lot of the time out of that. As far as like the disadvantages, one thing I don't want to necessarily get too ahead of ourselves is there is a lot of talk about like, AI tutors, like personal AI tutors. And I'm not sure we're there yet, though I think there is a possibility of, the potential or fidelity of those. But I think right now, I think what we really need to focus on is like, how can we use what teachers already know is, research-based and, has worked for them and what they're already seeing results on, but then leverage the artificial intelligence to maybe make their job a little bit easier, to be more efficient, or to scale it out to students that they wouldn't have been able to do before, just because of time, really.
Yeah.
I do have a question, and I'm going to jump on. So AI is kind of like the new calculator.
Right.
So let's get this out there. Writing essays, writing papers.
You're jumping right in.
Right into it. Tough question.
Right. So what do you say in professional development when your teachers say, I used to teach senior composition, and we wrote 15 essays in a semester, right? 1 every week. How is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation is similar to how we addressed when the internet came out and Google searches and calculators. I think most people have talked about those examples before. But in my experience with generative AI specifically, what you put into it is what you get out of it. And your knowledge base is really the limiting factor or the level in which the quality you're going to get out of it. If you don't know anything about a topic, you're probably going to get something that a teacher is just going to be able to flag off the top of their head without even put it into some sort of, checker or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that we have to remember, which I think is a good thing for teachers to think about, right? Is that it's still a knowledge-based, a knowledge-based workforce or knowledge-based curriculum, or having deep knowledge in a subject doesn't go away I think, with AI. Some people are like, oh, you can just Google it or you can just ChatGPT it, but you really have to understand the topic to get the most out of it. But to answer your question a little bit more specifically, that's going to be, I think, something that a school district wants to sit down, put some strategies, some process, some policy behind to make sure that everybody's on the same page, teachers are trained up, and then also conversations with students, because it is a gray area. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah. I think it's okay to do pencil and paper sometimes and take a baseline writing sample of your students, right? One day we are going to use AI, but we're going to use it as a class together. And the next day we're going to get out good old traditional and we're going to. Yeah. So I think there's definitely a balance there. But I am sure you have some teachers that are like, oh my goodness, this is really going to change a lot.
You have everything. You have teachers who are embracing it and using it as much as possible, and teachers who are very concerned.
Yeah.
So I want to pose this question to both of you. So ChatGPT is almost 2 years old now. And so that was the big thing. But now, when you think about it, a first-year student will be entering the workforce in about 96 months or 8 years. So, Chris, what I'd like you to address is, how do we as individuals make sure that we are prepared for an AI-embedded future? And specifically, Andrew, I want you to talk about how do we as educators make sure our students are prepared for an AI-embedded future. Chris?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think it's really tough. And even the technologists don't quite know where the technology is going to go. So you mentioned ChatGPT, this generative AI boom just came onto the scene less than 2 years ago. And so as we work with our technologists and companies across the state, they'll say AI isn't anything new to them. They've been working in it for a really, really long time. And there's, ebbs and flows where there's excitement periods and kind of these areas where, or these times where, there isn't as much innovation in the space. And right now it seems like there's a lot because ChatGPT gets released and then there's new additions that keep getting released. And even if you're using the free ChatGPT 3.5 versus the paid $20 a month 4.0, that there's a significant difference in the quality of it. And that's just over the past year and a half plus. And so what does the next year and a half look like? We have no idea. I mean, it could be as good as it is for a long time, or tomorrow something incredibly new could come out and completely disrupt everything. And that's what makes all of this really, really so difficult. How do you do that? I mean, I think it's a critical thinking and kind of skills based. There's things like computer science and some tech and AI literacy at its most fundamental level. But the one thing that we do know is that there's going to be a lot of change. And so how do you forecast 8 years in advance? I have no idea. You just really can't. And that's something everyone's struggling with. What we're seeing within a lot of the companies is there's incredible investment into the technology for them to use it for their business processes, to become smarter, faster, more competitive. But one of the big holdups that we are hearing from, again, technology leaders is actually on the workforce side, where it's really tough to kind of get their entire workforce bought into some of these things because it's so new and there aren't perfect solutions. Everyone's trying to figure it out as you go. So I think just an overall curiosity is incredibly helpful, and not being afraid of it, where hey, we're going to ban it in classrooms. That's just not the reality of the real world. And so if students go through 4 years of high school with having this technology banned, if they go to college or enter the workforce, they're already going to be really behind. So I think we have to play with it. We have to use it, but we also have to treat it like things like the calculator, or I think Wikipedia is another good answer, because when that first came out, if you were just copying and pasting Wikipedia, you're probably going to get in trouble, and it's probably going to be a little bit wrong. That's the other thing with these LLMs. Just because it's spitting out information doesn't mean that it's accurate. And so you have to fact check what it's giving you. But now you use Wikipedia just like anything else. But if you're smart, you go find the citations, have it take you to CNN or some other research publications, and then help it kind of guide you as your first draft.
Yeah, we're seeing that here in our office because we have 4 or 5 generations represented here on our team. And like you said, some come into the workforce using AI or at least familiar with it. And those of us who are like, what's this? And am I supposed to put at the bottom, I use AI to write this article?
Andrew?
Yes, I'd say about 95% of the conversations I have in my job, like on a day-to-day, are really around like the question you asked before, which is really about like students using it for cheating and for homework. Is that right or is that wrong? But I think this is a really important question, and you made some really good points. So what I think that what I've been doing and our team has been doing, what I think other schools kind of should be doing, is kind of thinking about it from like a programmatic standpoint, because in the curriculum world, like we work 18 months, 24 months out, right? Like because it takes that long to make a new course or to make adjustments to your programming and things like that. So we really have to think about things now, even to get things in place 24 months from now, let alone even beyond that. And so I do think we need to have a good sense of like talking to industry. I think healthcare is a perfect example because healthcare is incredibly regulated industry.
Yes.
But they are embracing, AI in ways. Talk to, doctors who talked about how they leverage AI, but still the human component is incredibly important. So how do we look into other industries and how do we think about what types of jobs, what type of skills, those types of things, adjust programming? Questions I don't have the answers to, but I've definitely been thinking about is like, are there courses now that we offer that maybe we shouldn't? And are there courses that we don't offer that we should? Mm-hmm. And then are there, skills that we aren't really thinking about as far as developing for students that we need to be developing? And on that, like we are offering an AI course at our high schools next year. So this August we'll have students in seats in an AI course that students will be talking about some of the most important topics around ethics, law, economic impact, things like that.
What changes AI? We keep saying, it's changing. Is there a big group of people sitting in a room and changing it? Is it just for human use of it? How is it developing? How is it?
The big drivers are these really big Silicon Valley-based tech giants at its most kind of simple level. And certainly there's lots of people working on AI, and there's different applications from healthcare to national defense, you name it. But largely it's companies and organizations like OpenAI and Microsoft, which is an investor in OpenAI, but then you have Google and you have Meta. And so these are areas not only where these really big companies are kind of leading in it, but because of the amount of computing power. And so we're in Ohio. Central Ohio has these data centers that the really big tech companies are having. Those are playing a role in it. But the investment to continue to build and scale out some of these technologies and figure out where it's leading us is literally billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And so in a lot of ways, smaller companies than some of those, some of the 10 biggest in the world, just for say, everyone else is kind of like playing catch up. It doesn't mean that a smaller company can't build out an application using the technology, but when it comes to true research and development in the space, it's some of the biggest companies in the world, just because of the computing power, the talent base that is required. Right. So PhDs, or sometimes in tech, there's 0 advanced degrees. You look at a Mark Zuckerberg and a Bill Gates and dropouts of schools because that's just where they're leaving. And then in terms of kind of the development of it, it seems about every 12 to 18 months there's been a kind of a big new leap. And so you mentioned November 2022 and where we've gone. And there's a really good book out called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, which I really, really enjoy. He's a Wharton professor. And what he says is he's not a technologist. He's a professor in entrepreneurship and innovation and education. And what he has mentioned when it comes to the generative AI, so things like ChatGPT, which is just one segment of artificial intelligence, some of the best prompt people out there are actually teachers. And some of the worst are actually technologists, because technologists are used to putting ones and zeros into code and coming with an output. But if you think of prompting, and what you have to do is you have to give the computer clear instructions on what you want to come out, and then gives you a first draft, and you say, no, delete number 2, revise number 3, build out number 4. Well, who does that type of work regularly? Teachers, and feedback within the classroom. And so that's been fascinating, this generative AI. It's just democratized it, because before November 2022, you had to be working at some of these leading technology companies to play in the space, but also where's the development going and what are some of the changes? Well, prompt engineering's one. For the past couple of years, that has been the big thing, where if you know how to prompt engineer the technologies correctly, you can really use it to your advantage. But more and more, and we've seen examples recently where they're going to be able to hook up things to your brain. And if I'm looking at a mug right now, I don't have to say anything. The artificial intelligence can make and create a picture that looks just like what I am looking at. And so less and less prompt engineering becomes important, whereas over the past few years, and your point about what do we educate on, we would have been teaching prompt engineering, but now it's less and less important. And so that makes it really difficult.
So, Chris, can you speak about your concerns about data privacy, security, AI in the educational setting? What are some of your concerns?
Well, it's just open. So these LLMs, large language models, if I put something into ChatGPT, for instance, or some of the other ones out there, I don't own that. That is not my intellectual property in terms of once I then put it into the computer and press enter, that becomes part of it. And so that's something that a lot of these big companies are worrying about, which schools, of course, would, is that if you're putting data, so whether it's student data or any other type of data that you own and you need to protect as your responsibility, as soon as you put it in, you're turning it over. So that's no different than using the internet or putting, insights, that you might have in data sets into anything else out there that's connected to the internet. And so a lot of these really big companies, they're building their own LLMs because they have to protect the data. And the only way they can do it is if it's within the walls of their organization. And so it's something that we all need to be thinking about. And we're in a classroom setting, reminding students, hey, when you put this information in there, you're handing it over.
Or staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Where, can you remind us where, like I see it, I do Instagram. That's about the only thing I do. And it is amazing how if I spend 2 seconds on something, the next 4 or 5, are about wellness. I do a lot of looking at wellness things, but that's AI, right?
It's the data and analytics, and the data and analytics run the AI and all the LLMs, and so it's predictive technologies. And that's why you get these targeted ads, because you search for Ohio State football tickets, and then all of a sudden you start getting targeted, and you see interviews of Ryan Day on your reels or something else. And so that's what the technology is able to do. It's really quite amazing.
We're seeing this all over. You all mentioned how you can look at the mug and they can do a brain scan and produce a totally different image. It's a little scary, right? But at the same time, this type of advancement is necessary. My question to you, Andrew, is as we're moving towards this, how do we ensure that we continue to cultivate emotional intelligence and not lose that human touch that's necessary for our students? But I even think for us as a society, how do we keep that there?
Actually, I think the very first thing is talk to our students. So I've had some really unique experiences talking to students about AI. Last fall, we did a student panel at Butler County ESC did a AI education summit. So we brought students to do a student panel for all the adults. And then actually just recently, AI EDU, who's been helping with the state of Ohio, they sent some of their folks to run through some AI literacy stuff with our students. And so I was in a bunch of those sessions to hear. And our students constantly, I would say the biggest theme that our students talked about was not like using it for doing homework. It was actually about they want teachers teaching them. They want humans teaching them. They want humans grading their papers. They had a lot of concerns about losing the human part of education and workforce. And I think that surprised a lot of adults in the room. I think a lot of the adults in the room thought they were going to be like, how do I use this for this? Or, the kids would be really, they are enthralled or excited about the technology, but they were actually much more in tune with the human side than the adults were. So I think that's really important to remember. And I've heard other people say this is just me, but an algorithm can't hug a kid and AI can't hug a kid, right? AI, you're never going to have the power that when another human sits down with another person and just that proximity, to help them out. It's just, we still need that part of it. So I definitely recommend talk to the kids, set a priority in whatever your strategy is around AI to do, focus groups with students, talk to them about it, ask them questions about ethics, ask them questions about what's right and what's wrong, those types of things. And then what concerns they have, what don't they want, or what do they not want to see as you put tools in place or things in place. I think it would surprise a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's amazing when you say that, because every time you bring the students in the room, they most often will let you know what's on their minds. And oftentimes we as adults are wrong, right? They totally surprise us which way they take it. And so speaking of our students, how can AI support inclusive education, ensuring that all students with diverse needs, that they have every opportunity to receive appropriate and effective educational opportunities?
Yeah, it's similar to the personalized learning question, but there's so many great examples of what it can do. One thing I'm going to kind of switch gears slightly, but it relates to this, is when it comes to some of the AI, the tools that track AI, I'm not sure I keep coming with the right name of it, but a lot of those tools have been falsely identifying AI in students that are English language learners.
Oh, yeah.
Part of that has to do with the fact that a lot of times, not all English language learners, but they might write it in their first language, and then they'll put it into something to translate it into a language. That's not uncommon. But then when it translates it, it sounds a little bit more robotic in writing. And so then it gets flagged when they actually wrote it.
I see.
Right? And so we also want to make sure that we understand that sometimes when using those tools, they're not completely accurate, and then certain groups of students might get flagged more than others, and that's a dangerous place to be in as a school district.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever use them, but I think a school would be wise to really provide good training and process strategy around that. But there's a lot of ways to support students. I've seen that AI has done a really good job of, if you ask it like, hey, I need some accommodations, and can you give me 5 accommodations for this specific assignment, right? And it's not that student or teachers shouldn't have knowledge about that. They do have knowledge about accommodations, but ChatGPT or something like that can help them create some things faster, and then they use their expertise to make sure the things that were generated are actually appropriate and the right fit. Its ability to be able to translate for students, put things into other languages, or just to kind of develop alternate assignments or assignments that are at the right level for students. I really think that if teachers leverage this and use their expertise, right, they're still the experts in the classroom, that they can hopefully provide not only better experiences for students, but also hopefully save some time for themselves.
So how does AI work? So you type in, like you just, that example, it just goes out and searches all of that, and then is it like a lamp? Don't worry about it, just turns on? I mean, how does it work? Like, where does it get all that information?
Yeah, I mean, it's from the data sets, and these, again, large language models is the LLMs is the phrase. But I would say the best is just play around with it.
Yes.
That is the best way for anyone to not figure out, because again, to find the answers is just so incredibly in depth, and there's just so much to it, but it's experiencing it. Yeah. And so even, I remember some of the first times I was playing with it, I would type in, hey, write me a script for an episode of The Office. And like that, it would just create 500, 1,000, 1,500 words. And just think about the amount of time that if you were to sit there from scratch. Now, is it great? No, not really, from the start. But again, that's where every month, it seems like every 6 months, every product release, it's getting a bit better. And then the other, and this goes back to the prompt engineering, is that when it spits out that first answer, then revise it and, say, hey, I don't like this, or make, Michael a little more funny, or Dwight a little more serious. And you can, that's where the prompting comes in, and that's where you can really see it shifting. I was playing around with it for some of the image generation recently, and it wasn't that great, to be honest. I still love going to Canva, for instance, more. And so I think there's a lot of these really high-tech tools, but then there's these really low-code or no-code tools. And so think about, for us as a small nonprofit organization, if we would have done this 10 years ago, we didn't have things like Canva or Squarespace ready for us. And so we're able to go find graphic design so much easier, and I'm able to pick and choose, what we like for a conference or something like that. And so I would say play around with it and have a lot of fun. There's some, I mentioned Ethan Mollick and his co-intelligence. I've been listening to some podcasts with him, and I think he's fantastic. But I would tune into those and just kind of go do some deep dives on it. An interesting anecdote that I've heard him share in some podcasts is that the artificial intelligence has shown in some kind of studies to be more checked out in December than in May. And the reason is it's because it's pulling data sets from humans. It's our emails, it's our information that it's pulling from. And what happens in December? Well, people go off for holidays. They have Christmas and Hanukkah, New Year's. Whereas in May, we're a little more focused because we don't have all those kind of outside influences. And so even the AI, which is supposed to be this amazing computer-generated intelligence, it's still dependent on us, which means that there can be things like biases, or a little more funny, where in May it's going to be a bit more lazy, or in December it's going to be a bit more lazy.
And to piggyback off that, it is a little bit of a black box, like where that information is coming from, and I think that's where some people are concerned about, like, well, you can just ChatGPT it to get answers. I actually think having like a knowledge building curriculum, or a really strong foundational knowledge in education is probably more important than ever, because it used to be more transparent, right? The information was in encyclopedias and books and in libraries, but now it's a little bit more of a black box of AI. So we do still need to build that knowledge for students, but also based on what we said before, like if you're using generative or if you're using ChatGPT or some sort of generative AI, if you don't have some sort of solid foundation, that's where you start to run into trouble and you start having errors or
Right.
producing things that don't quite work the way you
Well, and
want
I think
to.
the kind of the civics side and the critical thinking, because historically, if you go to the encyclopedia or if you go find a CNN article, you're putting trust in that they have fact checked it and they have, and everyone gets something wrong at some point. You can, if you go through all the encyclopedias, you'll probably find something off, or newspaper reports have editors that review things. But to have a student just plug it into ChatGPT and think, hey, whatever it spits out is going to be completely right. Like it struggles with math,
Right.
as simple as you think that would be, because that's a very yes or no, 1 + 1 = 2. It struggles with math, and so things like deep fakes and just what is the impact on society that as you're seeing things online, maybe was that computer generated? Did the president of the United States actually say that? Or was that some type of troll farm in a hostile country that created this to
Right.
kind of sow discord in our elections? And so these things, I think a lot of it is the root of critical thinking and more civics in a way, because of how fast the technology is shifting.
Yeah, which is exactly how our high school course is designed. It's all about those topics you're talking about, making sure the students are leaving with AI literacy, and as they enter the world, college or career or both, that they have a good understanding how to leverage AI, but also how it impacts their day-to-day life, as you explained, which actually is a lot of civics-related topics. That's kind of the interesting part. Sometimes we often think about it as purely technology, but
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about artwork? We've heard some pushback about it's not plagiarism. What is it when you take somebody else's work? Is it artwork plagiarism?
Yeah,
Anyways.
plagiarism, intellectual property.
Intellectual
stuff,
property. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'll go a positive spin on it. So, imagine you're teaching, a 7th grade social studies course, you're doing feudalism or something like that, right? Well, you could have students generate pictures of what it looked like, and then you could have students, their neighbor and a group of 3 or 4 students, then evaluate, did the AI accurately depict what it looks like based on what we learned about in the class? Like, that's a great way to leverage it to generate things, as opposed to old way. It's like, okay, draw your own picture. We got to spend 2 class periods on that, or give kids a ton of homework to finish that drawing, when you could actually get in way more into depth of developing the skills that you actually want to develop by using generative AI for picture development. But related to, the PI side, I'll let Chris.
Well, I think there's the good, and again, it democratizes this ability, and things also like a Canva, where you aren't starting with a completely blank slate, and you're finding different examples, and they have a million templates that you can go in. So it's the same there, but I also think that it is going to be, the technology itself going to be incredibly disruptive when it comes to things like that. So marketing, film direction. We've sat through it at the AI Coalition kickoff, where there was examples that look like a 2-minute long commercial that would have taken probably a week to shoot, and you have to shut down all these public places in LA and other big cities. It's like, nope, this is completely generated by AI. And so that, and I've spoken with, and I know some people more in creative roles, whether they're directors, I think there's a large disruption there. If you're a Taylor Swift, you still have that singular brand that everyone wants to pay attention to. But if you're hoping to just say, hey, I'm gonna, make a living creating, kind of content and videos for people, small businesses, where you're not the absolute best in the world, I think it's going to be pretty disruptive. And that's something that, it opens it up, but then that displaces some people working in that space. So we're trying to figure that all out.
Are you seeing universities pivoting? I mean, if you think about the degrees that our kids are coming out of college with, are they pivoting with us as AI is changing?
Yeah, I think we're seeing more and more in that space. I always use Pittsburgh as an example, where there is an incredible tech ecosystem in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's a lot like our cities. Maybe more like Cleveland or a little less like Cincinnati, but Columbus as well. And that it's a Midwestern city, and it's an hour and a half from Cleveland. It's pretty close, and they have built out a pretty incredible artificial intelligence and robotics hub. But it's because of Carnegie Mellon. As simple as it is, one university that's really gone deep into this. And so where you see traditional tech hubs across the world, places like Pittsburgh, which you wouldn't think of right away, or Boston, it's because of Harvard and MIT You think of Silicon Valley, Stanford, and Cal Berkeley. We're seeing the same, where there's the AI literacy that we have all been working on, and that's to get every student an AI literate education so they can go into the workforce. But there's also, for some of these technologies, you have to have advanced PhDs, and you have to be, amazingly smart, and I can never, sit in the same room or have a conversation with those people just because of what they're doing and the research that goes into it. But as we think about tech hubs and creating new businesses and doing a lot of true research and development, it's coming out of these universities. And so I think more and more we'll see things like AI, but it's also computer science and other applications within that space.
Yeah. Pittsburgh's a bold example for the OSBA forum, but, I think they're also struggling with the same things that we're struggling with in K-12, which is, should we embrace it? Should we let students use it? Is there advantages to that? How do we prepare them for the workforce? If their employer expects them to use it, and an employer would rather hire somebody who can leverage AI versus somebody who shuns it, then I don't think we as in K-12 or in the higher ed space are doing our students justice if we aren't helping them develop those skills. So I think they're struggling with a lot of those same issues that we are. And I know that there are some universities that have even developed some of their own LLMs and to help so that, and then have students use their own for the same type of intellectual property reasons that we discussed before. So we do have current, speaking of graduations at the very beginning, right? We have current graduates who are about to go to a college, and their college is going to be like, yeah, you need to know how to use this. And they'd be like, my school never, my school told me it was bad, and I never used it, or I only used it in secret, right?
Got to make that adjustment.
Yeah.
Chris, Andrew, thank you both for being here today and offering your feedback and your perspectives and your insights. I will tell you, you have helped me greatly. Not as scared as I was when I walked in the studio, but no, we really appreciate you all being here and the continued partnership that you're having with our state and the great work that you're doing for our students.
So is there one thing that you'd like to leave our membership with? One last thought that when you walk out the door, you think, yep, I left a good message.
I would say from my perspective, it's the curiosity we've been talking about. Everyone is trying to figure out what this means for education, for workforce, for the tech industry itself. And so it's the cities and the states and the regions across the world that are diving in and showing curiosity. So for those that haven't, played around with it, you can sign up for free and type in, hey, I'm going on vacation this summer and this is what I would like to do. And this is, parts of the world that I would like to see. Give me a week-long itinerary. And you can do fun things like that to see what it looks like. But I think the biggest is not being afraid of it, understanding that there are limits to it. But at the same time, if we don't interact with it and use it as a co-pilot or co-intelligence or some type of kind of assistant and tutor, that other places across the world are going to pass us by. And that's something none of us want.
Yeah, I actually really like that curiosity. I think developing that culture of curiosity with students and with staff at all levels of staff, because if we develop that culture of curiosity, that's going to have us engaging in the right work. But I really think listen to your kids, spend that time and whatever task force you're developing as a school district or whatever processes you're developing, involve kids in that and make sure this is going to impact them a whole lot more than it's going to impact us, right? This is what's going to be most of their life is going to be embedded with AI. So help let them be a part of that conversation as everybody engages with a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great conversation today.
I'll tell you, I have one in medical school and I use it quite a bit in medicine. I was really surprised.
Wow. It's amazing as I sat here and listened. Two things I'm taking away is, Mark, go ahead and play with it and don't be afraid, but also that the human touch is still necessary. I heard throughout the conversation that the adults and the good people that are doing good work with students are still going to be necessary. Absolutely. And I can't replace that with AI.
That's a good point. So thank you to our membership for your leadership in your local communities. And if there's any way that our OSBA team can help you, please contact us. We are here as a resource to you, our membership. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for being here at the OSBA Forum.